friend, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. Today we're going to make this long-awaited template. This has been a much requested one. This is the coffee drip coffee filter template. So first thing you need to do, as always, is cut out the templates, and then K23 does need to be pasted together with some tape because, you know, the template was just too big to fit on one page. Okay, set that aside. We're going to roll out two different slab thicknesses here. I'm going to start with a 1/2 centimeter slab. And if you don't know already, you should definitely be using thickness gauges just to make sure that your slab is the right thickness. Okay, this whole big slab is just going to be for the main part of the coffee drip. This is the cone, this is K23. The other pieces, I recommend you use a slightly thicker slab. So I'm just cutting this piece out and I'm going to set it aside for now. And then I can use my scraps to make a 1 centimeter thickness slab. So make sure you wedge out any air bubbles, and then you want to use some 1 centimeter thickness gauges to get it to 1 centimeter. With this 1 centimeter slab, we want to cut out the other pieces. That's K24 and K25. It's going to be the base and the ring. A couple people have been asking me lately how much clay you want to start out with. So I usually start out with 1 kilo of clay. Of course, you never end up using all your clay up. There's always leftovers because you're cutting out these shapes. But I do, of course, reuse all of the clay. You're not going to use up that whole 1 kilo, maybe half of it. It just depends on which template exactly you're using. Okay, and then as usual, if you watch my videos before, you know I always put my slab pieces in front of a fan first to firm up before I continue working with them. If you do this or not, it just depends on the clay that you're using, but my clay is a little bit loose, so I like to firm it up before I start working with it. You want it to still be bendable, but I don't want it to be floppy. So I usually put it in front of the fan for about 10 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to start with assembling the cone first. So you want to cut the straight ends at a 45-degree angle. And of course, make sure you flip it in between so that the 45-degree angles overlap. I have this great angle cutter tool, but if you don't have this tool, no worries. You can just use a knife or a needle tool. And then you just want to overlap them and press them together. I always have to do these things at such an awkward angle so that the camera can pick it up so you guys can see, but hopefully you can see clearly what I'm doing here. And of course, don't forget the inside as well. If you're getting any cracks, just feel free to rub them out. And now we're going to move on to the ring. So once again, 45-degree angles, make sure you flip it in between, score, use slip if you need to. I don't need to use slip with my clay. If I feel the need, I'll just use a little bit of water. And then this is kind of a tight turn here, which means your clay is going to be more prone to cracking. So just turn it, make sure you have a good connection there. And if you see any cracking along the edges here, like I'm smoothing out right now, that's totally fine. Just smooth it out with your finger. My clay does have a tendency to crack a little bit, so your clay might not do that, hopefully. And then we're going to attach the ring first. This is much easier than to do the cone first. So you want to place the ring, obviously center it, score both sides, and attach. And then I like to use a paintbrush with just some water on it to smooth out any extra scoring marks. It just tidies it up a little bit, but of course you want to make sure you're not adding too much water. So that's the little ring that's going to sit inside of the cup. And then because we're going to be adding the cone now, I really recommend you add some support here. So I found that my 1 centimeter thickness gauges plus the 1/2 centimeter thickness gauges are the perfect height to support the base. I just want to make sure that I'm not distorting and pushing down the base as I'm working, because even if you flatten it out later, clay does have memory. So if this wobbles a little bit while you're working on it, you might end up with warping later on. So you want to center your cone on top. I was talking over it, but you do want to pat the cone down a little bit into your wedging board to flatten out that edge a little bit, just so that it's more stable as you're attaching it here. Mark where it's attached, score both sides, and then don't worry, we're going to add a little bit more support in a minute. So press it in as nicely as you can without warping the base. Make sure that it's nice and stable. And if it can sit, great. If not, you can just hold it up. Maybe I should have done this before attaching, but you do want to roll out a coil. This should be about a pencil thickness, something like that. And then we're going to use this coil to press in and support our cone. So I'm just slowly working it in. This takes a while, don't worry, and you want to blend it up into the cone and down into the base if you want a seamless look. Especially with dishware, anything to do with food, you want to be able to put it in your dishwasher, you want to be able to clean it thoroughly, so any cracks here you do want to get rid of, because food can get stuck in those cracks and, you know, bacteria can grow in them. Okay, the rest we are going to do tomorrow. I want my coffee drip to firm up to leather hard tonight so that I can carve in the grooves later on and, you know, do the final cleaning up. So depending on the humidity in your studio, I usually put a piece of cloth over it and then just let it sit overnight to firm up. That works well in my basement studio, but if you live in a more arid place, you might rather cover it with plastic. Just depends on your studio situation and how much water you added to your clay. First, I'm going to go ahead and tidy everything up. I'm going to smooth out the sharp edges. You can see here there's a few like squiggly bits on the edges and just like sharpness. So if it's dry enough, I like to use my rib to kind of shave off those edges, and then I'll go back in with my finger to smooth it out. If you can't shave it, just smooth it out with your finger, and I'll go over the whole piece that way. Get it nice and smooth before we do the next steps. Okay, the next step is to carve the grooves. So I have this tiny little loop tool that I like to use for these detail works. But you can use any sort of trimming tool you have. The loop tool that comes in like a standard beginner's pottery kit is also totally fine. It might be a little bit bigger of a groove than what I'm having here, but it's totally fine. We want to carve these grooves so that the coffee can drip through the filter and just like slide down the grooves to the bottom of the cup. So this is actually a really important part for the functionality of your coffee drip. You need to have some sort of texture on the outside so that the coffee can drip through. And if you've waited to the right amount of moisture level in your clay, carving this can be a real pleasure. If you have any sharp edges, you can just rub them out with your finger. Okay, now it's time to add the hole. So I'm using a hole cutter here. I'm going to put up on the screen exactly how wide it is because I can't remember off the top of my head. But if you don't have a hole cutter, you can also just use a drill bit. And the width of your hole cutter or drill bit doesn't really matter that much. I've been told by coffee experts that it's the filter that slows down the drip. It's not actually the hole. So the hole can be a bit bigger or smaller, whatever you like. So I'm going to let it dry for about a week. before I load it into the bisque kiln. And as usual with these templates, I just go for a nice white glaze. This is just a very simple white. The speckles that you see in my pottery projects, that is actually iron in the clay. So just look for a clay that has added iron in it, or a speckled clay body if you want to get that same look. Back into the kiln, so I fire at 1240 because this is stoneware. And here is the final result. I think that this piece is not only functional, but it's also just like such a beautiful piece as an art object. You could always add a handle here as well. Some people like to have a handle on their coffee drips. I prefer this nice clean look. And then these are the filters that I use. And this is kind of a standard filter. It's called a Hario V60, but any V60 filter should work. The 60 refers to the angle at which the filter is designed for. So the coffee drip that we have is at a 60-degree angle. And if you fold it nicely, it will fit perfectly. And if you're wondering about the mug that's on screen, this is my tea mug, which is another template that I have available. And I hope that you guys enjoyed that video. Please leave any comments down below if you have any questions or you enjoyed the video. That helps please the algorithm gods. Of course, I'll have the template linked down below. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye, friend.